We're going to start now. My name is Joel Walk, and I am a resident of Stoughton, and I am the vice chairman of the Stoughton High School Building Committee. Our partner in doing this project is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the MSBA. You're going to hear them a lot. And in the structure of our building committee, as you can see, TJ Recupero, who is a Board of Selectmen, some of you, many of you may know, is the chairman, is myself. Dr. Rizzi, Mike Hartman, the town manager, is on it. Katie Pina Inokian, I'll get that right, is also on it from the school committee. Rick Hill, who was in the finance committee, is on it. Julie Miller, who's the senior high school principal, and who is here. Maureen Doherty, the purchasing officer. Joel Harding, director of maintenance for the school district. Mike Connolly, very nice guy who happens to be principal of Mansfield High School but lives in Stoughton, is on it, and he's very helpful with education. And Roberta Harback, who some of you might know, is also on the committee as a community member, and she was on the building committee for the Southeastern Regional Voc Tech project, which just happened. The building committee, as you can see, has the oversight on the project, and we will be working with all the project members to make sure everything works out well. The funding of the project is going to be by an appropriation plus a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and right now they could be around 50% of the cost of the entire project will be absorbed by the MSBA. Hopefully that's the target we're looking for right now, and the rest will be done by town. There will be an appropriation in the town meeting in May that we were looking for, and then after that there will be a debt exclusion, not an override, but a debt exclusion vote for members of the town, for voters in the town to come together and decide whether they want to float a bond in order to make this thing happen. So this is a presentation to members of the senior community. Excuse me. I am the person in the building committee who will be the primary contact between the building committee and the senior community. One of the reasons why is that I am retired and on a fixed income. Yay! All right. So I'm kind of interested type of thing. So this is what we're going to do. The presenters are Dom Taveri, who is from Compass Project Management, who is our owner's project manager. The education plan will be presented by the principal of the senior high school, Julie Miller, or combined with the superintendent of schools is here, Dr. Rizzi. And finally, the architect, Carl Franceschi, will do a review of the options that we have been talking about. Then at the end, if you have any questions, let us know, and then we'll have some closing remarks. I will leave with Karen my email address and a phone number, and hopefully I'll be coming back here on a kind of semi-regular basis to talk to the members of the senior community who have concerns about the project and provide as much information I can and come up with the answers to any questions they might have. So to get started, I'd like to introduce Dom, and you go ahead.
Good morning. How you doing? Thank you for taking time out on your Friday morning. We're going to just do a bit of a recap. First of all, Joel introduced me as the owner's project manager for the town of Stoughton. We were retained by the town of Stoughton last year. Actually, it was a little bit more than a year ago. We walked through the existing high school, and then the process went forward from there. Just to give a recap, as the owner project manager, we're here to facilitate the process going from the very beginning, which we have here, preliminary design program, all the way to the closeout of the project somewhere down the line in the next 3 to 4 years. When we were retained, one of our first priorities was to bring on an architectural firm, which DRA came on board around end of February, Carl, thereabouts? Of this past year. Immediately we got involved with looking at, and I'm giving a little history before we start looking at this, immediately we got involved in looking at possible locations for a new high school within the town of Stoughton. The concentrations were, do you have enough mass for a project this size? So we did find properties. We started to investigate the properties. For different reasons, either the properties were not sufficient enough in acreage, had some environmental issues that we didn't want to deal with. We're on the outskirts, more towards the center, which you're concerned about traffic situations as far as getting the students to a central location. We eliminated all of those by the end, except for one or two, and then we did eliminate that one to basically situating the school on the existing site. From that situation, Carl's team, and he'll talk about it, well, we came up with multiple options. We talked about the options of, and prior to that, I just want to jump back, is we started to do an assessment of other things. We looked at the physical assessment of the building itself. We started to talk to the students and the teachers and some educators also that were added, and parents in a visioning session back in June. To start to understand what the 21st century model is for teaching and educating the students of Stoughton High School. With all that putting together, we started to get together a space plan. How many square feet do you need for a new school? What do you need in that new school? Science classrooms, auditorium, the gymnasium, the size of special needs within the school. And we put all that together. That's when we started to come up with the multiple options. And the options were to look at the existing high school, whether you just renovate that high school, whether you do an addition renovation and demolition. You have to take down some of it to put the addition. Or do you situate a new high school on the grounds? That came up with, basically, we had 8 options of ad reno, 4 ad renos, 4 new construction, and a base renovation of the existing building. From there, we decided, we as a group narrowed it down by criteria. What was the most important? How did it meet the education plan which Dr. Rizzi and Principal Miller put together? How did it situate as far as the square footage you required for the classes? And we continued to do that. Part of that process was, after that, we put the whole package together, and it was called the preliminary design program, which we have to submit to the state, and they review it, and they have comments. We are now in the process of responding to their comments. The next thing we have gone through is really getting down to the Final Four, which is what Carl is going to be talking. Carl Franceschi from DRA will be talking about the Final Four. We have some milestones to hit. One of the milestones was to actually find out how much it's going to cost us, so we can have a better idea of better idea as far as making the decision whether to go new or add reno. We're now in the process of taking those 4 options, 2 add renos, and Carl will show you, and 2 new, and starting to price that. We have 2 independent estimators working on that right now. Our goal is to get those estimates by November 2nd. By November 6th, we will start to, after we reconcile the 2 estimates, we'll sit down with the school building committee members in a working group and start to discuss that. I will also reach out to some members who can't make that meeting. And on November 12th, we will have a school building committee meeting, and we will decide at that meeting, based on those criteria of education, cost, location, disruption of students, those criteria would be looked at, and that school building committee meeting will decide which preferred option we're going to. We will then present that to the Mass School Building Authority. We will actually be presenting it to the selectmen and the school committee prior to that for their blessing going forward. But by early December, I believe December 2nd, we will present that to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for their comments. There'll be a window of about 6 weeks thereabouts where we're reviewing, but we'll be in contact with them, so we'll know, as this is very much a living process, so we'll be constantly in contact with them to make sure that we tweak everything. And we will start to put together that schematic design going forward. And as you can see, the preferred schematic report will be in December, and Carl shows that. They're looking at this through that process time, and by January, we will be proceeding towards that schematic design process and going through the boards and the approval that Joel was talking about. So don't want to take too much time, because I know Carl's got quite a bit going. and here's the timeline, and here we are, and we've hit pretty much every single milestone along the way. We've been very aggressive in doing this, but a very, very good school building committee, excellent working with the educators in this process. Julie Miller and Dr. Rizzi did an excellent job putting together an education plan that incorporated everything. We just got some responses back from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. They were minor, basically clarifications. There wasn't anything full-blown that we couldn't answer. So we're moving towards our goals. So with that, I just want to introduce Principal Miller, talk a little bit about the education plan and the design going forward. So.
Thank you, Dom. Hi, good morning. So we worked over the summer on putting together this educational plan, which Dom was talking about. It's an extensive document. It's about 50 or so pages, and it's really the result of several years of conversations, as well as meetings with the architects and the project managers, directors, and leaders within the high school community, as well as district leadership, and then a multiple-day visioning session where a consultant was brought in to lead us through faculty, administration, students, parents, and community members, lead us through some really guided discussion so that we could really hone in and narrow down what we want to accomplish as a school community in Stoughton for a new high school building. Stoughton High School right now is currently a level 1 school. We do excellent work. We do a great deal of 21st century learning already in a very tight and inflexible space. So one of the things that we are hoping for is building a building that is going to be flexible, not so that we don't know what's going to happen in 100 years or 50 years in education. So we want to be able to build a building that's flexible enough to change with the times. Right now, we know that we want a 21st century learning facility. So we're looking for spaces that allow for creativity and problem solving and critical thinking, interdepartmental work, interdisciplinary work, a lot of collaboration and flexibility and creativity. Those are the things and the skills that we're really trying to hone in on, as well as technology. And technology is changing every day. So we want a facility that can accommodate those kinds of things as well. So some of the things that we have talked about is how we want our different departments and spaces within the high school building to be associated next to each other so that programs can really work together to build a really productive community. Currently, the high school building operates in really insufficient space. So if you've been to the high school, and if you haven't and you want to take a tour, I'd be happy to bring you around. But the high school gymnasium, for example, is extremely small. It's a very tight space. It restricts us in a lot of different ways. In terms of our athletic program, we are unable to really expand that program beyond what we already have. And physical education and health and wellness is a huge focus for our students as well as in the future. We have a weight room that at one time was state of the art. It is becoming a little less so as the years go on. And it's a tight space as well. So we're looking for a facility that would be able to accommodate a fitness center that we might be able to open up for community use, which we currently would not be able to do in our current building. A gymnasium that's big enough to hold tournament games and really be a community resource for our community. We have a lot of youth athletics programs that would like to use our space. We have our own athletic programs. We have PE classes, health and wellness, and other community groups that come in and use our spaces, and we want to be able to accommodate them. We really want this to be a flagship for our whole community, not just for the students that are functioning, passing through it. We are looking for science labs that have space for students to work or research and then actually step into their lab in the same space and be able to investigate whatever it is that they're interested in or whatever is in the curriculum for that day. We're looking for CAD spaces, computer animated drawing, where they can step in and actually manufacture the things that they're dreaming in their minds. We're looking for black box theater, which is a really flexible, dramatic space that allows our students to be able to expand our theater art program, which is a real need for our students and a real drive for our population. We have been growing that program, but we're reaching our limits within the building and spaces that we have. We would love an auditorium that is available to all of our community members for all the various uses that they may need, but also for our dramatic productions and our music program, graduation ceremonies, all of those wonderful opportunities to bring the community in and have them observe and see all the great things that our kids are doing, because they are doing amazing things. We're looking for those spaces, and we're looking for areas for teachers to be able to collaborate together. It's no longer are the days where a teacher goes into a classroom and shuts the door and teaches all day and they don't talk to anybody else, and those days are gone. So we're looking for spaces that allow them to come together and brainstorm and talk about the curriculum and create assessments and lesson plans that are really engaging our students and pushing them forward to be successful. So those are the kinds of things this document talks about. It's very extensive. I think I hit everything. Some breakout spaces we're looking for students where they can sit down and either work quietly by themselves or work with a small group or a larger group. We would like our media center, our learning commons, to sort of be the center of our building, the heart of our building. That would be, the function of the library. We want our cafeteria to sort of have that same feel, and just really be a warm and inviting building. So that's where we are for the educational plan. And who am I handing this over to? Carl? Perfect. Thank you.
Hello, I'll stand here if you can see all right. I'm Carl Franceschi with DRA Architects. And just sort of continuing on from what the administration put together in terms of the educational program, the state requires us to translate it into this form where we list every single space in the building so that we can calculate how large the building should be. And right now it's projecting, excuse me, to be almost 230,000 square feet. The existing building is smaller than that. It's about 216,000 square feet. But moreover, there are other issues with the existing building, that not just the size, but as Julie was mentioning, the arrangement of the existing building isn't very flexible and doesn't match up with the way they'd like to teach and learn. So that's a bit of a challenge in terms of trying to think of it an addition or renovation of the existing building. Can classrooms be organized in clusters? Can the library be the heart of the building? Can the gymnasium and the auditorium have appropriate lobby spaces and be closed off from the rest of the school for community use? Those kinds of adjacencies and relationships need to be attained too. And before we designed anything, we first wanted to gather this educational program. We also wanted to analyze the existing building, sort of physically. Does it keep out the rain? Does it keep the heat in? What's the condition of the finishes and the furnishings and equipment and so forth? So we did a thorough analysis, and there are certainly many systems in the building that are tired, old, at the end of their lifespan. And again, an addition or renovation of the building would require fairly extensive work, and that's what we're pricing up right now with the cost estimators, so that we can compare it versus the cost of new construction. A lot of the lab spaces are very inadequate, both in size and equipment. And further, we analyzed the entire building space by space as to whether a given classroom was large enough, whether the gymnasium was large enough, and so forth. And this diagram, you can sort of see it graphically. The spaces that show up as red are all inadequate in size. They're deficient, meaning not just marginally deficient, but like more than 10 or 15% smaller than the state standards. And we would need to address that in a renovation project. So if we just quickly go floor by floor, you can see how many of the spaces are red, or the ones that are showing up yellow, or it's a little bit hard to see here in the projection, but are just sort of marginally okay. But there are a number of classrooms, particularly in the oldest part of the school there, that are inadequate in size, and something drastic would have to be done where walls are taken down and classrooms expanded. We also thought about from the site point of view too, in terms of how does the site accommodate the desired educational program. And there's certainly some issues now with the way cars and buses circulate on that property, and safety issues and for pedestrians and so forth. The condition of athletic fields and some other issues too that need to be addressed as part of an overall renovation. So we are looking at both the building and the site. So as Dom mentioned, we've gone through a number of options here. We've really tried to keep a very open mind as to the possibilities here. And what this is you might call it a decision tree, where we started off first thinking about, let's look at the entire town. Where's the best location for a high school in Stoughton? So we weren't married or locked into the existing location necessarily. We thought about up to 10 or 12 other parcels of land in town and considered them in addition to looking at the existing building. Well, it turned out all 10 of those, for various reasons, didn't work out. Many of them were too small, they were poorly located, they weren't owned by the town and would be expensive to acquire, didn't have proper infrastructure, and so forth. So eventually all of them were eliminated, and we focused on the existing building. And the big decision there with the existing building is, should it be new construction on the high school property, or should it be an addition renovation? And there were a number of options on either of those. We've narrowed it down now to these 4. So these are addition renovations. These are new construction. We have 2 of each that we're studying further. But also for comparison purposes, a lot of people ask, how much would it cost just to fix the existing building? You know, to bring it up to code, to make it energy efficient, to make it, to repair all the finishes and the systems. So we are calculating that cost too, just for comparison purposes. That option doesn't do anything educationally. It doesn't change any classrooms, doesn't change the location or the configuration of the building. It just fixes what's broken, basically. And we will have a cost for that too, that, as I say, for comparison purposes. So if we look at these, the way we've labeled them, the addition renovations are called B, B2, or B3. The new are called C, C1, or C2 as well. So that's the site matrix when we eliminated all 10 possible sites. This is a three-dimensional view of the existing high school with the first option, B2, which is suggesting that the existing high school sits here. Here's Pearl Street. The middle school is back here. Here's the football field, soccer field, and track. This option suggests doing some demolition. Julie mentioned how the gym is sort of woefully inadequate in terms of size, and there's really no way to expand or renovate that. So we're suggesting demolishing that, demolishing the oldest portion of the building, replacing it with new construction, shown here in white, and at the other end of the building, in order to make up for some of the spaces that need to be added, we do a bit of addition there, and then renovate the remaining. So this is looking down on it, from above as a plan, if you can understand that. So the existing school is shown dotted here, and the area in blue is all existing. So this suggests, as I say, doing some demolition with a piece of new construction at one end and a new gym and locker rooms at the other end of the school. So that's one option, B2. And we've actually thought about, I know you can't see all the detail, but we have thought about it in detail, how that would be accomplished. Because with these options, the entire school would remain in operation, fully occupied during the entire renovation process. And it would take up to at least 3 school years for this to happen. For instance, the school would be in operation and a new gym would be being constructed. And then once that's constructed, we can demolish the old gym and do this piece of construction. Once that is done, we can renovate one of the classroom wings. And then after that's done, we could renovate the next classroom wing. So each of those are phases of the project where a contractor would be working within the school, but sort of safely segregated from the school with barriers and their own dedicated access and so forth. And education would be going on around that. Obviously, there's some disruption, some inconvenience in all this, but it can be done. It can be accomplished. We've done it in other communities, and this is one of the options that's being priced up right now by our cost estimating consultants. A second addition renovation option suggests a bit more demolition. So not only the gym gets demolished, but this front classroom wing and the oldest portion of the building also gets demolished and replaced with new construction. So when you look at this, it's almost half and half. Half the existing building remains and half of it's replaced with new construction. In this case, the new construction is a classroom wing. So we build new classrooms at one end of the building. And then once those come online, we can demolish one of the existing classroom wings and build a new gymnasium. Once that comes online, we can demolish the old gymnasium and build a new library, media center, and science labs and make a connection around so that we end up, with a complete building, again, accomplished in phases. This, too, we believe is at least 3 school years to happen. The interesting thing here is by building these new classrooms, we can get closer to the education plan, that 21st century education plan that Julie talked about, in terms of clustering classrooms, having some teacher planning space with each one, having some small group spaces, some science labs, so the building is much more flexible in that regard. We'd still have some old classrooms that get renovated. We still have some science labs at this end of the building. The library ends up at this end of the building, not quite the heart of the school. So there's still some compromises educationally when we look at these addition renovation possibilities. But again, we feel it's important that we develop these options and price them out for comparison. Now looking at new options, the strategy with new construction on a site like this is to find a location where the new building can be built in its entirety while the existing building remains in operation. So here's the existing school, and then behind it, sort of wrapping around it, is one possible location for new construction. In this case, you can see it's sort of an L-shaped building, and it would be entirely free of the existing building. So the existing school could remain in operation. The parking lots get disrupted a bit. The playing fields obviously get disrupted because we're building, on top of the soccer field and tennis courts back there. But for the most part, the school can remain in function the way it does today with a little bit of temporary space or temporary parking needed. And what we end up with, if you can see this site plan here, this is Pearl Street. The existing school sits here. The new school is that L-shaped building wrapping around the existing school. And we have plans that show the floor plans of the building in a second. But then the athletic fields that are disrupted get replaced. So there's a new football field, a new track and soccer field. Once the old school comes down, that land is freed up and redesigned as athletic fields. The way the school works, here's a floor plan of it. That it's not quite an L, obviously, but so coming from Pearl Street, you enter the building here, administration is here, those large public spaces, gymnasium and auditorium are in this wing of the building, and then the classrooms, again, you can see how they're clustered. These are individual classrooms with some open space, some teacher planning space. Again, it more closely mirrors that ideal 21st century learning that Julie talked about and is in the education plan. This would be a 3-story building. It's fairly compact in footprint, and the academic wing, as we go up to the second floor, it stacks, it duplicates, and you can see the gymnasium and auditorium in this lower wing here. So there's 3 stories. This building would contain, as it does today, the superintendent's office as well, so it's in this space. Also, the program, as of now, calls for the cable TV studio to be located in this new high school as well. So a second new option that we're looking at, the second one, C2A as it's called, is more of a courtyard building, but the same general strategy of building it behind the existing building while the building stays in operation. In this case, you can see we avoid the parking lot here and here, so the school can more closely function the way it does today. And the school does disrupt the football and soccer fields, but can be constructed all in one phase. And then once it's occupied, the existing building gets torn down. Here's the new building here, and then these fields get constructed. Again, the driveway comes in the same way it does today off Pearl Street and drives right through to Adams Street over here, with the front door here, and cars, parents dropping off kids enter here. The buses, which serve the middle school as well, drop off in the back, and there's sort of a back door and front door that come into a common lobby in the school. So here's the first floor plan. There's the front door and back door. All the yellow areas in these drawings are circulation space, hallways, corridors, lobbies. But also, this plan, this is colored yellow. This is really the cafeteria. But again, it's, as Julie described, it's more at the heart of the building. So it's more than just a place to have lunch. And it's not an enclosed room. It's part of the flow of the school. It's almost more collegiate in that sense. It's more like a college student union, and it's called Student Commons. But again, there's a clear separation. The community spaces, you might say, the gymnasium and auditorium are at the bottom of the drawing. The academic spaces, the classrooms, again organized in clusters, are at the top of the drawing. Administration is right by the front door there. And there is a courtyard. This is open space here. This is open to the sky. This is outdoor space, so that you get natural light into these spaces that are around it. It's a very compact footprint, which is nice because the space at the high school site is pretty precious. There's not a lot of excess space there to accommodate, parking, safe drop-off areas, and the athletic fields that the town would like to have there. So this is the first floor plan. The second floor plan, again, the academic areas stack on 3 floors. The gymnasium is at the second level here. The auditorium, which is a large gym auditorium, can be accessed both at the second floor and at the first floor. There's an upper lobby here that's in sort of an atrium space in the center of the building. And also in the center of the building, this large yellow area here is the Library Media Center, also in 21st century terms known as a learning commons. And it too is more at the heart of the building now. So again, this is some of the freedom that new construction provides us. From a design point of view, we can more closely get to that ideal layout that the school would like with the library. It's sort of a bridge between the community spaces and the academic spaces in the heart of the building. And again, this stacks on 3 stories, so the classrooms or clusters repeat again at this level. So those are the 4 options that are being considered. And collectively, the way that we want to analyze these options, certainly cost is important, and that's being generated right now. That's sort of number 1 on this list here of criteria. But there are a lot of other factors too that collectively we want to consider in selecting the preferred option out of these 4 choices. And this list has been developed with the building committee and others, and some of our other community forums that we've had to identify issues. How closely does it comply with the educational vision, and what opportunities does it provide? How about potential for expansion? The school is fairly limited by the state in terms of its size right now as to what they'll reimburse, but we know there may be growth over time, and we want to look at that in each of these. How much does it disrupt the existing school and the teaching and learning that's going on? That's a criteria that we want to use. So the mechanism that we've agreed upon that we'll use is to set up this matrix where all those criteria are listed here, and then all the options are listed across, and we've reduced it down obviously to the 4 options, B2, B3, C1, C2. So those are the 4 options being analyzed, and then we'll kind of score them or evaluate them objectively. We try to do it sort of unemotionally and carefully using everyone's input. And in this case, we again use sort of green and yellow and red like a traffic light, green being positive, red being negative. And this is ongoing. We're evaluating this right now. We just had a building committee meeting last night where we had discussion about this. And as Don mentioned, in our schedule in a couple of weeks is when we'll come back together again with the cost, with these criteria, and identify the preferred option that ultimately will get submitted to the state and submitted to the town for their votes in the spring. So that's where we stand with all this. It's right in the middle of the process. We're right on schedule, as Don mentioned. The next step is submitting or selecting that preferred option, submitting it to the state, sitting down and having discussions with the state, and then ultimately moving ahead with schematic design, where whichever option we select, we develop it in more detail, and so we can get much better cost estimates, so that by Springtown meeting we can come to the community not just with detailed plans but with detailed costs and schedule information too, as to what the project will look like. So that's where we are. We did want to mention there are several very good public access points to, if you have access to computers online, to keep track of the project. It has been covered by cable TV very well throughout all the building committee meetings and community forums to date. And I believe they're all available, going back as well. So you can see what's been presented and discussed previously, and stay in touch with the project. And now's the time for questions that you may have too on the process. Good.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you very much for everybody for participating and helping with this presentation, and thank you for coming here. If you have any questions, anybody?
Does the community get to vote on this?
Yes. There will be an appropriation put forward at the town meeting in May that will fund this project. And then, since it will require a bond to cover the cost, there will be what they call a bond exclusion vote, and that will be in a special election in June. And if both of those things pass, it will move forward. If, in my past experience in these projects, I've unfortunately seen the members of the senior community not being reached out until the votes are actually ready to go. So we're going to do it differently this time, which is why we're starting early. We're not advocating one way or the other. The important thing that we're trying to do with the senior community in Stoughton is to make sure that everybody understands what's going on, what the impacts are, and how will it impact their families and their life, and what the cost will be. Does that help?
Yes.
Yep.
What is,
Can you explain the bond exclusion or the debt exclusion, what that means if you were talking to like a 10-year-old?
Well, there's two ways you can raise taxes to pay for things, and one is what's called Proposition 2.5 sets a limit on the amount of taxes that you can collect. It's based upon the value of the property in the community. If you need to have more than that Proposition 2.5, you can have what's called an override. What the override does, it says, well, we all agree that we need more money for taxes, so we're going to do more than what Proposition 2.5 limits us to, but that override stays with the town forever. The debt exclusion says, you know what, we're not asking for an override. What we're asking for is just to raise taxes that will cover the cost of the bond for this project. Temporary. So if it's a 20-year bond, and I've told Mike Hartman, the project town manager rather, has said that that's what they're looking at the end of 20 years, that bond will be paid for, and that's money that the town doesn't have to pay for anymore. So those of us that are here 20 years from now will be able to easily see the end of that. I always make the comment that this is a 50-year school, and as vice chairman of the building committee, 50 years from now, if anybody is not happy with how it turned out, if they can find me and I'm still around, I'm more than happy to address the issue. Does that explain it for you?
Just property taxes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just
Anybody else? Go ahead.
What is the logic behind putting the gym on the second floor instead of the first?
That's it.
Carl?
That's a great question, and because yes, you would think that you'd want access on the ground floor for spectators and so forth, and that is generally the first choice in designing a high school. On this property, though, as I described, the land area is somewhat limited. We've got an elementary school, a middle school, a high school, all sharing the same property. We need to accommodate a certain number of cars and fields and so forth. And so the footprint of the building we want to make as compact as possible, as reasonable. And it is reasonable, we think, to stack the gym on top of the locker rooms. There are direct stairs to get up there. We're not disturbing, the sound and so forth. The activity in the gymnasium really isn't going to disturb, spaces below it. And it's a large space. It's 12,000 square feet. So the footprint of the building would have to get 12,000 feet larger if we were to put the gym on the ground floor. And that would mean something would be reduced. A field would be lost, the amount of parking spaces would be reduced or something like that. So again, we think with the proper design of the entrance and the lobby and make it convenient to have stairs and elevator to get to the second level, to enter the gym for spectators, that it can work that way. So, does that answer it?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Do you think this is to Julie, do you think it's realistic to have a gym space or the locker or the weight room that is honestly accessible to the public? And is that something that we would really want in a high school?
I think you're asking me if we would want the fitness center and the weight room accessible to the public. Is that what you're asking?
That's right.
Yeah.
And especially during school hours or.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be during school hours that we might open it up to the community. There are lots of communities out there that have those sort of fitness centers, especially in the new buildings that I have visited. And they do try to make those spaces available to the community. There are obviously restrictions on that use of that space. Certainly our top priority would be safety and security to our students and school community when school is in session. And so we wouldn't want to do anything that would pose a potential risk to anyone in the building. Carly,
Also,
you
what
had-
we see often is, thanks. What we see often is that the fitness center or weight room is opened up early for teachers, and it's a great sort of perk for the teachers. They don't have to buy a membership to a health club. If they teach there, they get to use the facility at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. So when we say it can be a community facility, that's one sort of thought, is that off school hours it's available at least to the teaching staff. It could possibly be designed too that it's available to the community, on a Saturday or a weekend or something like that too.
So my concern, so I like the idea that teachers or other people who work in the building can have access to it, but my concern is that either before, during, or after school, someone can come into the school and plant a knife or a gun or a bomb in a basketball or something, or some kind of weapon, and then the kids can have access,
Yeah.
Then, and how do you prepare
Sure.
against that? Do you have guards that look inside your bags? Do you have metal detectors? And what is the security rationale?
There's a lot of security concerns these
Yeah,
days.
and even today, our building is used about 24/7. It's open all the time for community use, even now. And security is our top concern. And we have staff that supervise those areas. We certainly would supervise them carefully. We would be constantly, visiting those spaces and making sure those spaces weren't being violated in that way. And they would be it wouldn't just be open access. People would not just be able to enter our building at any time without going through the proper channels and the proper securities that we have in place. Even with the building we have now, we have a visitor system where the doors are all locked and we have to come in and check in and you have to have an ID, etc. Those security measures would still be in place even in a new building. The building wouldn't just be wide open for people to be able to walk through at any point. So I think that we would.
Sort of see it here too. In all of these plans, I just used this one here, but in all of these plans, here's the front door. The operational idea, and we'll have further meetings on this as the design evolves, is that all the doors, and there are a lot of them in a high school, all the perimeter doors would be locked during the day. All visitors would be directed to the front doors, so to speak. There's always a vestibule, both for energy reasons, so it's like an airlock, but where you have to get buzzed in to there. It's immediately adjacent to the administration area. The inner doors remain locked, so if you come in, you can't keep going. You have to go into the office. And even there, you get buzzed into the office. And then you can be, greeted, sort of vetted, get a visitor badge, or whatever the exact procedures would be before you proceed any further. The way the school operates now is that if you have a meeting, somewhere else in the school, you're generally escorted. So somebody comes down, meets you, and walks with you to your meeting. There would be a conference room right in here if you're a parent just coming for a conference and so forth. So there's ways operationally and ways in design that we can, address concerns about security. Certainly, we're very sensitive to it. It's actually a required sort of step in the process that we have a meeting, not just with the administration, but with all sort of first responders and other projects. We've actually involved state police and so forth. So we talk about, design and security issues from their perspective too. How would they respond to an issue? How can we improve the design and so forth? There's a lot of technology involved with locking doors and having cameras and door checks and so forth that are part of the whole design as well.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
So you feel like this is the way it's gonna go? They're gonna put a new high school where the existing one is?
We have not made that decision yet. That decision has not been made. We are looking at 4 alternatives. 2 of them are renovations with additions to the existing high school, and 2 of them require a brand new high school. The building committee is not unanimous about which way to go on this, I can tell you that. And there's been a lot of discussion back and forth. The architect has drawn out better plans for us to understand how the buildings work, all 4 options. And as Dom said earlier, the construction cost estimators are now getting together to find out what the relative costs are between all 4 options so that we can use that as part of our evaluation. On November 12th, the building committee is going to meet. And at that meeting, the hardest decision we're ever going to make is going to be which way we're going to go. Sure. Anybody else? Yes?
It's for Julie again. Now, take me through what a classroom would look like in this new school. Like, say it's English or history, not a lab, just a regular classroom. Are we still using smart boards? Are we still using whiteboards? Are there outlets everywhere? How do the proposed new classrooms differ from the old ones, and what kind of features are inside the classroom itself and built into the classroom design?
Yeah, exactly what it's going to look like, I don't know. We haven't got that far in the process, but I can tell you what we're envisioning in terms of the overall feel of the classroom. We envision smart boards or similar technology being in all classrooms and spaces with lots of presentation space. So whether that's whiteboards or some other means for having presentations, there'll be those kinds of devices available in the classroom as well. With our biggest hope for our classrooms is that they'll be flexible. So a math classroom might be a math classroom today, but in 10 years it could become an English classroom or some other version of some other curriculum. So the classrooms aren't going to be designed, with the exception of labs, to be locked into one specific purpose like math, English, etc. So the classrooms will have Wi-Fi. They'll have plenty of electrical outlets to be able to support the activities in that classroom, probably in various locations within the building, within that classroom, so that multiple different presentations can be set up. And we're looking for flexibility within that classroom itself. So we're looking for furniture that is easily moved into different kinds of formations, so that it could be small groups, large groups, individual presentations, that students might be able to sit, off to one side by themselves while something else is happening in the classroom. So that we want all kinds of different possibilities to be able to take place in that classroom, so that it's more student-centered and not simply stand and deliver, which has been the approach several years back. So we want those kinds of spaces. so the actual details, and we haven't got that far, so I don't know exactly, how many outlets and what walls and windows, etc. But lots of natural light. I know the architects have been very cognizant of placing classroom spaces and those kinds of spaces in a way that they have windows and they have outside and they have the natural light as well. So all those things are being taken into consideration and being considered in the development. Does that answer your question?
Yep, mostly.
Okay.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Are you increasing the number of classrooms so that there'll be fewer students in each class? Or are they going to remain the same?
Which one of you wants to take this one? You wanna do this one? Yeah. Good luck.
So we are blessed in Stoughton to have been supported by the town's members for a budget to be able to keep our class size at about 19. So that's excellent class size. If you compare us to other towns around, that is significantly lower than those towns. Many towns are now bulging at 28, 30. So we want to be able to at least maintain that class size of 19. Some of our classes do get to be a little bit larger when we get into our advanced classes. Sometimes those are at the 28 level because of staffing concern or issues. So we might keep those at 28, but we're looking for that same class size at 19. So in order to be able to do that, it does mean we will have slightly more classrooms than currently. In the high school building right now, there are lots of underutilized spaces. So in the square footage that Carl shared with you, we have some portions of the building which can't be utilized for their original purposes because of damage over the years. So even though it seems that the square footage is similar, it would actually be taking the same square footage we have now and utilizing to its full potential. So that's what we're looking for.
Anybody else? Yes?
I know you're getting all tired of my questions, but so one of the a central focus of engineering, especially at colleges, but at all levels and all kinds of buildings, is sustainability. How is the proposed Stoughton High School, either any of the designs, how is it going to be designed in a sustainable way?
Carl?
Sure. There's a couple of guidelines that we're going to be following moving forward, whether it's a addition renovation or new construction. First of all, because we're in partnership with the School Building Authority at the state level, all school projects in Massachusetts are so-called green schools. We're going to take it even one step further here, again, regardless of which way we go, and make it a LEED Silver certified school, which is a step above just a baseline green school. And that actually has the advantage of getting the town additional reimbursement from the state. That, as an incentive, the state says, if you can design a sustainable, energy efficient facility, we'll give you more reimbursement. So that means in this kind of situation that we're looking at, among other things, very high efficiency heating and ventilating systems that do things like utilize condensing boilers, which are very efficient. They're like 95%, 96% efficient in terms of heating compared to the existing steam system that's in, about 2/3 of the existing high school. It's probably down to 83% efficient or something like that in terms of fuel usage. There'll be ventilation systems and occupancy sensors, which in a space like this would sense how many people are in the room by measuring carbon dioxide as we all exhale, and it would adjust the ventilation requirements proportionally so that it's not running at the highest requirement all the time, even if there's only 2 people in here. So
Cool.
yeah, it is, and the same way occupancy sensors work to turn lights on and off. If we all leave the room and somebody forgets to turn off the lights and there's no motion in the room for a few minutes, the lights go off automatically. So we save energy that way. It'll be a very well insulated building, even more so if it's new construction than if it's existing. But in either case, it will be above the code minimum required amount of insulation in the walls, in the windows, and the roof. So again, we save operating costs year after year in that regard. And then another part of sustainability is making sort of choices that are environmentally sustainable. So when we choose materials like this floor tile, this is a very common material, but it's made of vinyl, not a great material. If you you should look up sometime the way vinyl is produced. It's not a very healthy industry for the workers producing vinyl, but also it's a high maintenance. This has to be stripped and waxed every year, sometimes twice a year. Use a lot of harmful abrasive chemicals to do the stripping, and then you're putting more wax in. So we recommend choices now that are like linoleum or sheet rubber, things that don't have to be waxed, things that have the same durability, and maybe a little more expensive initially, but in the long term, when you don't have to do that maintenance year after year, they save cost, as well as being better for indoor air quality. So all the materials too, like wood doors or wood cabinets, are specified with low VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds. What you sometimes, or carpets, you know, when you have a new carpet or new paint, you smell that those are VOCs. All of our specifications are written to minimize those in new buildings so that the air quality is maintained at the healthiest possible level. Other choices involve low water usage. So again, Massachusetts plumbing codes these days require low flow fixtures. When you flush the toilet, use a minimum amount of water. Well, we go again a step beyond that and find even more economical fixtures that use less water. One system we're considering and have used in several high schools is a way actually collecting rainwater and using that in lieu of domestic water to flush toilets or to irrigate athletic fields. So we're not using more domestic water. Again, these are choices made not just for cost reasons to save in operating cost, although most of them do, but also for environmental reasons, so that recycling is encouraged. In the materials that we specified, you know, ceiling tiles or cabinetry or even furniture, we would specify certain recycled content in the manufacture of those materials so that we encourage. And again, these are all areas in that system I refer to as leadership in energy and environmental design that give you certain points to achieve certain levels. And as we said, we want to go for what's called the silver level there, which will get the town in 2 additional reimbursement points. So Joel was talking about achieving 50% reimbursement or so from the state. This would give you 52%. So it's that much more, and if just, you know, think about that in millions of dollars, 2% adds up. So certainly going to be a sustainable building. We will have further discussions on this as we move forward with the design, depending on which design is selected. So.
Thank you. So I think we'll hold off on questions. Thank you very much for attending. We appreciate it. I hope you've learned something. I've told Karen McDonald that I'll be here on a regular basis. If anybody wants to speak with me or needs to get in contact with me, I'll be the person that you can, I'm the go-to person to make sure that everybody finds out what's happening or if I can get your questions answered. So once again, thank you very much for coming, and we hope to see you again. Thank you.